Among those whites who feel a genuine concern for the fate of their race, defeatism is by far the most pernicious and widespread of all issues. Of all the obstacles that impede our progress, it occupies a unique and fortunate position in that its origin is internal as opposed to external. Why do the assuredly grim prospects on the horizon bring one person to despair while another remains unshaken? Armchair psychologists would explain this variance as the difference between pessimistic and optimistic natures. This is incorrect. As dispositional affects, beginning and ending in the self, both pessimism and optimism involve an element of delusion. In contrast, the true believer is characterized neither by optimistic thinking nor by the avoidance of its opposite. Rather, we can affirm that he transcends them both from above, while the nihilist does so from below. The word fanaticism has acquired a negative connotation in an era where anything short of ironic detachment is seen as suspicious, if not outright dangerous. According to its original meaning, a fanatic was an individual inspired by God, and inspiration itself necessarily implied the notion of man as a vehicle, combined with the sense of a compulsion to act. It is this applied devotion, in short, this faith as inspiration to action, that enables the true believer to maintain his course where others falter. Faith, of course, comes in various forms, even within a single religious doctrine. Thus, attaining a syncretic interpretation of faith as it pertains to political activity will require an attempt at comparative theology. In the Christian tradition, for instance, there are a number of passages that portray faith as indissociable from action. One of the more salient examples is found in James 2:14-26. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? A person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. When informed by faith or doctrine, the disciples' actions are a means to give form to the formless, and the element that establishes a channel between man and the divine. In political and ideological terms, convictions that do not compel one to act are meaningless. In Platonic and later Kantian philosophy, as objects of the highest knowledge, pure ideas and forms fall into the category of noumena, in contrast to phenomena, which encompass all things perceptible by the senses. Following this reasoning, human actions that originate from the metaphysical plane constitute the pure idea made manifest, forming the perfect dyad of noumena phenomena, thus unifying the realm of being with that of becoming. This is implicitly felt by all those whose struggle is said to be in service of a higher truth. To the ancient Romans, however, the noumen was not simply a transcendental idea or form, but a sheer power that is capable of producing effects of acting and of manifesting itself. For the Romans, quoting Evola, the sense of the real presence of such powers or noumena as something simultaneously transcendent and yet immanent constituted the substance of the original experience of the sacred. Merging the Platonic and Roman interpretations, we obtain the following picture of the noumen, not of the idea as divine inspiration, but rather of divinity as both idea and action. The true believer, then, is a mediator or third power between heaven and earth. The above-mentioned view of ideologically infused action as being animated by a divine force striving to actualize itself can be reinforced further with a detour into Chinese theology. Adhering to a panentheistic conception similar to that of the ancient Romans, Confucianism identifies the universal god Tian as both nature and the pattern discernible in the unfolding of nature, as immanent transcendence, or again as both noumena and phenomena. This belief in the divine as the organizing principle of reality, as logos, invalidates the very possibility of secular human activity. Man, in acting on behalf of the ideal, mirrors the identical process of self-realization that is occurring ubiquitously in all things. This also corresponds in Aristotelian philosophy to the concept of entelechy or entelecheia, meaning the principle that molds all matter according to its potential or dynamis. Interestingly, medieval scholastic thought translated entelecheia into the Latin actus, a term that designated the strictly spiritual act, Thus, the human actions that have a spiritual basis as entelechies are concrete iterations of the Logos. Considering that Aristotle identified the soul as the entelechy of the body, we can return to the passage from the book of James according to which, as the body without the spirit or soul is dead, so faith without deeds or spiritual acts is dead, and acquire a newfound understanding. As the divine is the morphological agent that creates order from the chaos of sheer potentiality, so man is called not to be a servant of order, but order itself, self-overcoming to be reborn as pure entelechy. When the Actus is aimed at subduing an impure enemy, the resulting conflict takes on an initiatory character whereby the warrior is engaged in a dual overcoming, of the self as well as of the other. In Revolt against the modern world, Evola states that, wherever the actions of the spirit take place within the body of real actions and events, a real parallelism can be established between the physical and the metaphysical, the visible and the invisible. The material victory reflects a corresponding spiritual event that has determined it. In other words, it appears as the real sign of an initiation and of a mystical epiphany taking place simultaneously. For the initiated, then, the application of the organizing principle within and without is a means to purge both internal and external enemies, creating symmetrical hierarchies that bind the real to the superreal. In essence, this is an evocative allegory of holy war as a process of self-actualization. It would be amiss not to mention the pivotal role of faith in fostering a sense of unity among those who believe in an eternal truth. The upward path of self-overcoming that we have mentioned necessarily involves transcending the ego, material concerns, selfishness, vanity, the inherent pettiness of man, all of which are both cause and effect of an atomized and individualistic existence. The New Testament tells of those who, through faith, conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouth of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign enemies. Whatever numerical or material advantage they may or may not have enjoyed was only the earthly imprint of a prior and immaterial advantage. The true source of power was derived from, as mentioned in Indo-Aryan texts, being united with the Supreme as an arrow is united with its target. Naturally, it follows that those who have reached super-individual consciousness under the auspice of the Logos are more prepared to understand the meaning of community, which by definition is super-individual, and thus become like spokes of a single wheel. The symbol of the wheel, recurrent across multiple spiritual traditions, is frequently associated with both the sun and thunder. The Celtic god Tyrannus, later Romanized as Jupiter and known in the Scandinavian mythos as Thor, is typically depicted holding both a thunderbolt and a wheel with 8 spokes. Although the specific meaning of the symbol and the number of spokes does vary, the significance of the manifold convergence into a central point remains constant. Various passages from Christian texts confirm this interpretation. In Ezekiel 1, for instance, it is written, "Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with its 4 faces, and they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance was, as it were, a wheel in the middle of a wheel." Not only does the image of a wheel within a wheel suggest the presence of the divine power within the believer, it also refers to the aforementioned concept of absolute symmetry between the physical and metaphysical planes, and the notion of the community of the initiated as identical to the entelechal Logos. In light of this interpretation, the following passage in the book of Proverbs, "A wise king winnows or smites the wicked and drives the threshing wheel over them," appears as another allegory of holy war, with the threshing wheel representing the unified community of faith. Elsewhere in the epic sagas of ancient India, the victory in battle of Aryan gods hinges on their ability to disable their opponent's wheel. In The Destiny of the Warrior, Georges Dumézil writes that, "Just as Indra in the duel is the victor because he detaches or pushes down one of the wheels of the solar chariot, so Arjuna, the son of Indra, in the 8th book of the Mahabharata, succeeds against Karna, son of the sun, only because one of the wheels of the latter's chariot sinks itself miraculously into the ground." This double pushing down or sinking of the wheels can be interpreted as the corollary of a simultaneously occurring sinking of the losing community into telluric decadence and away from enlightenment. To maintain the community's spiritual commitment is to prevent the wheel from being too easily detached from its purpose. The Absolute, the Logos, the Cause, the Life Force. Its name is less important than the unwavering faith it inspires in its followers. The aesthetic value of the concepts described thus far is secondary. More important is the so-called meta-historical component, and the reminder that the supposed demise of the political, moral, and spiritual ideal is not only a recent phenomenon, but also, crucially, an illusory one. At this critical juncture, reframing the ideological struggle at the symbolic level, beyond merely superimposing a layer of gravitas onto an already grave situation, may provide some with the resources to adopt a super-individual perspective and counter the ambient forces of dissolution.